Hey y'all, Snarky J Cosplay here with my review of Chapter 7 of the Book of Boba Fett. And as usual, endings are always a little bittersweet. This one is no different. It's bitter because it wasn't that great an episode, but sweet because they're finally done butchering Boba Fett every Wednesday. This show was lackluster from start to pretty much finish, save for episode 5 and 6. My rating for the finale, which should have been grand and really was meh, I give it a 5 out of 10. It is a meaty, 1 hour long episode. I love a long runtime in a show like this. A lot does happen in it, which makes up for the lack of, how should I say, Fett-centric plot points throughout the past few episodes. However, it really suffers from being directed by Robert Rodriguez, especially compared to how well-paced episodes 5 and 6 were. Once again, we see the corniness and childish elements of his directing style return, and it pretty much kills any coolness that the episode would have had without him. Some of the action sequences feel slow, they feel out of place, they feel kind of cringy, and they're also super long. They honestly don't feel like they match Star Wars style at all. Additionally, this finale doesn't set up much for Boba Fett's future. And finally, it solidifies the fact that Boba Fett, at least when it comes to Disney, is not the guy us Fett fanatics knew and loved. That being said, let's get into the spoiler part of my review. Right away, I was hoping this episode would start out with Boba Fett kicking some major ass. We haven't seen him do much of anything cool, and when we saw how efficient and what a straight up killer Mando was in episode 5, I was really hoping that Boba Fett would finally get the same treatment in episode 7. And we don't get that. Once again, we get the feeling that Boba's not really in charge here, and that his friends don't even respect him. In fact, the Spy Kids crew, or the mods, they don't even seem to really think that he's full of any good ideas at all. I noticed in episode 6, which wasn't directed by Robert Rodriguez, that they weren't allowed to speak, and I liked that so much better. One thing that I did think was pretty cool about this episode was the dynamic between Cad Bane, the Pikes, and the Mayor. Cad Bane is really slick with the way he talks to them, and I really thought that that was great writing on his behalf at least. I wasn't entirely surprised that he pulled out the fact that the Pikes were the ones who were behind the massacre of Boba Fett's Tusken tribe. I think that that's a really cool plot point. I just think that it was completely mishandled by this episode. Now, moving right along, when they brought in that X-Wing, I was terrified that they were gonna bring Luke into this. I thought it would be completely out of character, and I thought that it was just gonna take away Boba Fett's relevance in his own show. Instead, it was Grogu's arrival, which we pretty much all knew was gonna happen, except I didn't think it was gonna happen in the Book of Boba Fett. This was just more setup for Mando Season 3, which makes me feel like Robert Rodriguez constantly saying this show was all killer, no filler, was really code for this is all filler leading up to the show that Disney Plus actually had a budget to make, which is Mando Season 3. I was really stoked to see Cad Bane and Boba Fett finally come together, but we don't get a flashback sequence to any of their prior interactions, which would have been cool in a show called The Book of Boba Fett. We don't even really get anything super neat out of that interaction at all. All we get is Boba Fett once again backing down, and we even get Cad Bane telling him he's soft, and Boba Fett just accepts it. He backs down because Fennec tells him to, and he basically just takes an insult from Cad Bane willingly. It's honestly sucky to watch. I did like some of the action sequences once the townsfolk started turning against Boba and his crew. However, I think the body count for the mods was too low. I just don't understand why the Gamorrean guards got Mufasa'd off a cliff, but somehow Joan Jett and her friend with the weird eye get to stay. Something else I thought was pretty cool was the conversation between Mando and Boba Fett. I thought it was pretty cool that Mando really sticks to his guns when it comes to his creed, and that for once, I think Boba actually found some use in it. It's really nice to see our two main Mandos kind of interact in a more deep level, so to speak. I thought the next action sequence was either really neat or bordering on the ridiculous. It was cool in that Boba's helmet was on pretty much the entire time, and that fact allowed for them to use a stunt guy, because that 100% wasn't Tem's movement, it wasn't his body, it wasn't him at all, and I thought that it made the scene that much more effective just because we got somebody a lot more limber moving around in that kit. I also thought it was pretty neat watching Mando and Boba play off each other. I think that in certain instances they seemed to really have a synergy that worked out really effectively. But it was definitely ridiculous in that there was way too much Robert Rodriguez stuff going on here. Boba standing with one leg almost up to his chest, the knee darts firing in one direction and firing a pistol in the other. It just looked dumb. It's not Star Wars, and it's not even the move that anybody who was once considered a practical man would ever do. Naturally, when things start looking dire, reinforcements are called in, and we get more corny dialogue from Boba to his pal Black Chrysanthemum once he's brought in. The dialogue is corny and pretty much serves as a constant reminder of who it is that's directing and why he shouldn't be directing this. Moving right along, we get into an overly long fight with some big scorpion-looking droids that look right out of the Terminator or something. This fight is too long and it's ridiculous. When Pelimoto arrives with Grogu and Mando's now trying to reconcile with his baby in the middle of a firefight, I thought it was honestly just ridiculous. It wasn't the place for it to be put in. And shortly after, when Pelly's on the floor spitting out a tooth, I was wondering if I was watching a remake of The Three Stooges instead of Star Wars. I know this is going to be a super unpopular opinion because in the history of things, Mandos have ridden mythosaurs, and that was our first introduction to Boba Fett in the holiday special years ago. He rode in riding a mythosaur and said, "Hello friends, I am Boba Fett." But watching him ride in on that Rancor was honestly all I needed to feel like I should have turned off this show 2 episodes in. We barely get any cool action sequences with Boba Fett in this show, and when we do, it turns into some big kaiju versus robot fight a la Pacific Rim, which pretty much kills any feeling of what Star Wars has ever been. Star Wars has always been a little bit goofy, it's always been a little weird, but the whole giant monster fighting giant robot, it's not in Star Wars' DNA. It just feels out of place, and it took forever in this episode. It's also a reminder that Robert Rodriguez should really just go back to doing Shark Boy and Lava Girl sequels, because this isn't it. Now, one of the things that I thought this show always did brilliantly is wasting time and wasting potential, and what it does with Cad Bane is no different. In the world's most awkward duel, where a skilled marksman decides to shoot with a rifle instead of a blaster, Boba returns to the only place he loves more than his Bacta tank, the floor. Once again, his helmet is peeled off his head, Cad Bane is laying him out and kind of insulting him, and when we think they might just off him because he looks like he's really just accepting death at this point, he manages to rise up, uses his gaffy stick and his Tusken Raider training, and pretty much offs Cad Bane. Just like that, the only cool villain, the most high-stakes fight that we were looking forward to, is over, done, and dusted. Of course, as big monsters are prone to do, the Rancor is now tearing up the city, which is pretty cute because Boba said that he didn't want the city to be destroyed, and instead he brought his big stupid pet out, and that big stupid pet just started destroying the city anyway. While this is happening, we get an offensively gratuitous reference to King Kong that had me rolling my eyes so hard it physically pained me. Naturally, Grogu's arrival means that he gets to save the day by using the Force to convince the Rancor to take a nap, because we all know we needed the Funko set of the Rancor and Grogu napping together, right? Besides that, Fennec is once again proven to be the only one out of the duo of her and Boba that deserves any respect and real hype at all, because she manages to take care of the last of the Pike guys and the mayor and a few others all in one go, proving that she is ruthlessly efficient in everything Boba Fett should have been and wasn't through this entire show. And when you think maybe they'll redeem him somehow, instead we get a cheesy sitcom ending with Boba tossing a melon at Black Chrysanthemum and the mods being envious that they weren't also offered fruit. And at that point, they kicked off some really 80s music, a laugh track, everybody hugged, and it faded to black. Sorry, that's not actually what happened. What happened is we got to see Mando flying off with his baby boy to give us the show that Disney actually cares about making, which is The Mandalorian Season 3. But I guess we have another 10 months before we get to see that. Now, the teaser at the end did make me think that Cobb Vanth is gonna take over for Boba, because even after all of this and everything he's gone through to defend Mos Eisley, Boba Fett is still convinced that he and Fennec Shand are not made for ruling. So the fact that Cobb Vanth, who's experienced as the Marshal of Freetown, it makes me believe that maybe next season, if there is one, Cobb Vanth could end up leading Mos Eisley. Honestly, at this point, I can tell you that I'm not invested. It was a lackluster end to a lackluster series. Continuously throughout the finale, the dialogue was poorly written and pretty out of character and cringy. The action sequences were completely out of character for Star Wars and were pulled more out of Spy Kids and Robert Rodriguez's style of directing, which should never be mixed in with Star Wars at this point. And a lot of the other action sequences were weak, repetitive, and way too long. Again, I just don't think this show is what it should have been. I think we were all waiting on a more calloused, cold Boba Fett going out and doing missions, and while I would have been really excited for an older, more grizzled Boba Fett handling crime in Mos Eisley, we got a Boba Fett that gets knocked around, and the best episodes of this show, he's not even in. This chapter especially was a complete letdown when you consider that it's the finale and it comes after the two strongest episodes in the season and then ends on a really weak note. The entire series left a really bad taste in my mouth, and honestly, I can tell you I had way more fun getting to review it and interact with people based on it than I did actually enjoy watching the show. That being said, I've been Snarky J, and that is all I have to say on the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 7. It gets a 5 out of 10 rating, which I feel is more than fair for what Robert Rodriguez and his crew served up for us this week. Thanks for watching, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure you let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode and of my reviews in general.